My name is Chanika. I'm 74 years old, and I want to tell you something tonight that I spent most of my life running from. Not running from danger, not running from circumstances, running from something inside myself. A truth so simple and so devastating that for decades I could not allow myself to fully face it. The truth was this: I could not accept my life as it was. I could only accept it as I wished it would become. And the distance between those two things, between what was and what I wished for, was where I lived, where I had always lived, in that gap, in that constant, exhausting, invisible war between reality and my insistence that reality be different. And I didn't know I was at war. I thought I was just living. I thought everyone felt this constant, low-grade friction with existence, this sense that things were not quite right, not quite as they should be, not quite enough. I didn't know there was another way until Japan showed me one. I came to Japanese philosophy late. I was 59 years old. I had spent nearly 6 decades insisting in ways large and small that life cooperate with my preferences, that people behave as I needed them to behave, that circumstances arrange themselves according to my sense of how things should be. And when they didn't, when they refused my preferences with the indifference that reality always brings to our preferences, I experienced something I never stopped to examine, a constant, subtle, almost invisible form of suffering. Not dramatic suffering, not the kind you can point to and name, the kind that sits beneath everything, the kind that colors every moment with a faint wrongness that you cannot locate or explain. Just this sense that things were off, that something was missing, that peace was always somewhere slightly ahead of where you were. The Tao, the ancient Chinese philosophy that so profoundly shaped Japanese culture and aesthetics, does not teach happiness. It does not promise resolution. It does not offer a technique for making your life go the way you want. It offers something that initially sounds like far less, and that turns out to be infinitely more. It offers alignment. The possibility of moving through your life in harmony with what is, rather than in constant resistance to it. And the Japanese artistic and philosophical tradition absorbed this idea and built something around it that I have been living inside for the past 15 years. Something that has given me more peace than 50 years of trying to arrange life to my satisfaction ever did. The first thing the Tao teaches about acceptance is something that I had profoundly misunderstood. Acceptance is not passive. It is not resignation. It is not the giving up of someone who has decided that nothing matters. It is the most active and engaged and courageous stance a human being can take in relation to their own life. Because resistance, the constant war with what is, feels like engagement, feels like caring, feels like doing something, but it is actually a form of absence. Because when you are resisting what is, you are not actually here. You are in the gap. You are in the argument with reality. You are in the parallel universe where things are different, where they should be different, where you are maintaining the case that they need to be different. And while you are there, your actual life is happening here without you. Acceptance says, I am here. This is what is. I will meet this, whatever this is, with my full presence. Not because I approve of it, not because I think it is ideal, not because I have stopped wanting things to be different, but because here is the only place where any real engagement with life is possible. Here is the only place where anything can actually be changed if change is possible. Here is the only place where beauty can be noticed, where connection can happen, where the actual texture of being alive can be felt, rather than perpetually deferred to some future moment when things will finally be right. The Japanese concept of wabi-sabi gave me a framework for this that I could actually inhabit. Wabi-sabi is often described as an aesthetic of imperfection, of finding beauty in the incomplete, the impermanent, the imperfect. The cracked tea bowl that has been repaired with gold, the moss growing on a stone, the asymmetry of a handmade object, the weathering of wood over time. But it is much more than an aesthetic. It is a philosophy of existence. It is the recognition that imperfection is not a deviation from how things should be. It is how things are, always, inevitably, completely. And that our suffering comes not from the imperfection, but from our refusal to accept it, from our insistence on holding our lives up against some imaginary standard of how they should look, and finding them perpetually lacking. If something in what I am sharing is reaching a part of you that recognizes it, then stay with me. Because what comes next is not just understanding, it is practice. The actual daily lived practice of finding peace through acceptance. And if this space is offering you something real, come back when you need it. Because the Tao is not something you understand once. It is something you return to, again and again, every time the war with reality begins again. I began practicing acceptance in the smallest possible ways, not with the large things. The large things were too charged, too much history, too many years of resistance built up around them. I began with the small moments of daily friction. The train that was delayed, the weather that was wrong for my plans, the conversation that went differently than I had hoped, the meal that was not quite what I wanted. These small daily irritants that I had always experienced as the universe failing me, I began to practice meeting them differently. Not with forced positivity, not with pretending they didn't matter, but with something closer to curiosity. This is what is actually here in this moment, in this reality that I cannot change. And when I turned toward what was, rather than away from it, something shifted that I had not expected. The moment was more, not better in the conventional sense, more present, more textured, more actual, because I was in it rather than in the argument about it. And this small discovery, repeated in small moments over weeks and months, began to accumulate into something larger, into a different relationship with existence itself, into what the Tao calls Te, often translated as virtue or power, but closer in meaning to the particular quality of presence that emerges when a person is aligned with the nature of things rather than fighting against it. The second Japanese concept that transformed my practice of acceptance is mono no aware. There is no direct English translation. The closest is something like the bittersweet awareness of impermanence. The particular quality of feeling that arises when you are fully present to something beautiful, and you know simultaneously that it will pass. The cherry blossoms in spring, the quality of light in late afternoon, a conversation that is going well, a moment of unexpected joy. Mono no aware is the willingness to be fully present to these things, not despite their impermanence, but because of it. To let the knowing that they will pass make you more present to them, not less. To let the transience add depth to the experience rather than stealing from it. This requires a particular kind of acceptance that I had never practiced, the acceptance of loss before the loss occurs, the willingness to fully inhabit a moment while knowing it is temporary. Most of us do the opposite. We either avoid fully inhabiting moments because we fear their end, or we inhabit them while furiously pretending they will last forever. Both of these are forms of resistance to reality. Mono no aware is the third option. Full presence to what is, including full presence to its passing. And in that fullness, in that complete meeting of this moment and this moment's nature, something becomes available that neither avoidance nor denial can offer. Real peace. Not the peace of having arranged things well, the peace of no longer being at war with how things are. The Tao speaks of water as its primary image of wisdom. Water is soft. It does not insist on its own way. When it encounters an obstacle, it does not fight the obstacle. It flows around it, below it, through the smallest available opening. It is not passive. It is moving constantly, but its movement is with what is rather than against it. And yet water, over time, shapes stone, not through force, through the patient, persistent, gentle wisdom of always moving in the direction of least resistance, of always finding the way that reality itself offers, rather than insisting on the way that the self demands. For years I lived like stone, trying to shape water. I applied force to the reality of my life, in the belief that enough force would make it comply, that enough planning, enough pushing, enough insisting would eventually produce the circumstances I believed I needed. And the water of reality flowed around all my insisting, and nothing was shaped except me. I became more rigid, more tense, more exhausted, more certain that the problem was the water's refusal to cooperate, when the problem was always my refusal to flow. The third practice that Japanese philosophy gave me is the practice of Ichigo Ichie, one time, one meeting. The understanding that each moment, each encounter, each experience is utterly unrepeatable, will never exist again in exactly this form, is occurring now, in this particular configuration of light and feeling and presence, for the only time it ever will. And this recognition, truly felt rather than abstractly understood, is perhaps the most powerful invitation to acceptance that exists. Because if this moment is unrepeatable, if it will never come again, then the war with it is not just futile, it is a squandering. It is spending an irreplaceable thing on resistance rather than on the only thing that could make it worthwhile: presence. Real, full, accepting presence. I remember the first time I felt this not as an idea, but as a lived reality. I was sitting in a garden in Kyoto. It was late afternoon. The light was doing something particular with the shadows under the trees. There was birdsong and the distant sound of water. And I was there, really there, not planning, not regretting, not wishing it were different or that someone else were there or that I had come at a different time. Just there, with exactly what was. And the beauty of that moment was so complete, so overwhelming in its ordinariness, that I understood for the first time what the Tao had been pointing at all along. This moment, this unrepeatable, imperfect, fleeting, ordinary, extraordinary moment. This is what there is. This is what life is made of. And the question is not whether the moments are good enough. The question is whether you are present enough to receive them. The Japanese art of acceptance does not end with pleasant moments in beautiful gardens. It extends to the hardest things, to loss, to failure, to the parts of your life that have not gone as you hoped and may never go as you hoped. The Tao's acceptance is not selective. It does not apply only to what is easy to accept. It applies to all of it, to the whole of what is. And here is where it becomes genuinely demanding. Here is where acceptance is not a nice philosophy, but a practice that costs something. A practice that requires you to meet your losses with the same willingness you bring to your joys. To stand in the middle of what has gone wrong and choose, not resignation, but presence. Not pretending it is good, being fully here with the fact that it is. My name is Chanika. I'm 74 years old. I live in a small temple where acceptance is not a concept, but the texture of every day. Where each morning begins with what is rather than with what should be. where imperfection is not hidden or apologized for, but lived in with a kind of quiet gratitude, where the Tao moves through the day like water, unhurried, uninsisting, finding its way through whatever is there. And I have learned, slowly and imperfectly over 15 years, to move a little more like that water, to insist a little less, to be here a little more, to find the peace that exists not after things are right, but inside the fullness of meeting what actually is. That peace is not a destination, it is a quality of presence, available now, in this moment, in this imperfect, unrepeatable, fleeting, entirely sufficient moment that is your life happening right now. Before we part, I want to ask you one thing. What are you refusing to accept? Not in judgment, in genuine curiosity. Because what you cannot accept is exactly where the war is happening. And the war is where your peace is being spent. Name it in the comments if you are willing, because sometimes the naming is the first step toward the meeting, and the meeting is where everything changes.